want to introduce you Ivana Ancic. She is a composer, sound designer, orchestra, and alumna from master's degree program composing for film. She will tell us now how to make the best creative music choices for your game. So, word to you, Ivana.
Hello, Привет. My name is Ivana Ancic, and I'm going to be talking today about how game music is conceptualized and how to make the best creative music choices for your game. We'll learn about the elements and language of music storytelling in games and basic approaches to composing music for games. Second part of my presentation will be guided implementation of music into Wwise and FMOD if the time allows. Based on my experience working as part of the audio team at Berklee College of Music in collaboration with the Asset Center for Video Games and Digital Media Innovation in Valencia in Spain last year. And this will help us to better understand composing process and how to ensure smooth transitions and integration of our music into the game. So let's get started. Musically speaking, we always ask ourselves how to strengthen a scene, how to build tension to avoid repetitiveness, and how to support gameplay. How do we help a player to focus or to better understand a state, level, location, and overall how to give a game that thing that makes it so special and unique. So, just a second. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having troubles with the PPT. So speaking about uniqueness, we need to discuss what is first of all music, role of music and function of music in games. One of the first roles of music in games is to set the scene, and music can help us a lot to define time and place by using different instrumentation or different scales. We can set the player into the right location, for example, by using pentatonic or whole note scales. We know that we want to move the player to the Asian continent or South American continent, or if we use Middle Eastern scales, we know that the game location is set somewhere in the Middle East. Next role is to introduce characters, and for that we use iconic music themes to connect them to each character. We have examples in many games. One of the most famous is, for example, The Legend of Zelda with its iconic themes. Next role is to signal a change in game state. And for that, we usually use vertical remixing and for increasing or decreasing the dramatic tension, we can manipulate the tempo and harmony. For communicating an event to the player, we can frequently in games, we can use stingers to communicate that something is happening, like we can use a stinger if the player dies in a particular level. And to emotionally connect the player to a game, we also develop very interesting and unique music themes or musical motifs. To enhance the narrative and dramatic story arc, music can help a lot, and actually it can recognize these emotional high and low points in your game. So how to create this unique soundscape in a game? First of all, we need to understand the medium and to compare and contrast elements to linear media and music, because these differences will affect how music is conceptualized, composed, and synchronized to work within a game. Creating an impactful music and soundscape for a game is really a challenge, and the audio should not only serve the story, but actually bring up the story to the next level. And one of the steps on that path is, as I said, is understanding the medium itself. So let's simply define a game. What is a game? Simply said, it's an interactive experience consisting of states and triggers. Now, getting back to the medium itself, if you look at linear media music, In that type of media, we have a linear timeline where the path is predetermined. The emotional focus can change based on the performers, and the length of the piece is variable, controlled by conductor or performers. So this is a typical traditional narrative storyline where the writer sets up the story, the characters, and then several plot points leading to climax, and finally the conflict is resolved and the story ends. That's a typical linear storyline. In interactive media music, we have an environment that is controlled to varying degrees by the player. Length of time spent in the scene, unless it is a timed event, path through the scene, and variability in the experience of each scene. So just to summarize, in linear media like film, there is no interaction, and in video games, music is interactive and adaptable based on the player interaction, and that's the crucial thing to understand and to actually strategize composing techniques that we want to use. So this variable length of experience that I mentioned depends on the type of the game and the platform. So you can see from this table that in casual games, player spends around 2 to 3 hours. In console games, 10 hours and plus. In multiplayer online massive games, 50 hours and plus. And that amount of player experience directly affects and dictates the average amount of music we need and must compose for a game. So in casual games, for 2 to 3 hours, this is around 15 minutes. For console games, 2 to 3 hours. And for massive multiplayer online games, that comes to 15 hours plus. So how can we compose 15 hours of music or even 15 minutes of music? And what problems do we find on that path? First of all, there is a repetition problem. Because the more often the audience is exposed to a sonic idea, the less impact it has. And our brains are subconsciously organized in a way that we subconsciously filter out the repetitive sounds. For example, you all know when you hear a car alarm that you simply disconnect after a few seconds until you hear some new sound, or when you constantly, repeatedly hear some repeating noise sounds, you also disconnect because otherwise we would be really overwhelmed with all this cacophony of sonic world. So why does repetition kill suspense? Exactly because of the reason I just mentioned. And because we have multiple outcomes that can be played multiple times, we need to strategize and to think about how we can actually avoid this repetitiveness. So we can randomize cue loops. We can write multiple intros for the same piece of music. And we can use interacting composition techniques such as horizontal resequences. We can choose between crossfading, branching on transitions. We can use vertical remixing, which is actually dynamic mixing to increase the intensity. We can add instruments, manipulate tempo and rhythm. We can add singers and musical flourish additions. And we can also adapt harmonic, melodic, and notes to fit better to the game. After we have thought about how to avoid this repetitiveness and to actually create this randomized cues and use different composing techniques and strategies, we need to think about synchronization and integration of music, because composing is one part of the process and synchronization and integration are actually the crown of everything. And we should think about methods how we can actually synchronize our music and integrate it into the game. So the game engine that is built makes requests to the music engine to change from one state to another or to play a musical stinger. These requests are called hooks because the game is hooking into the music engine. And we need to decide which actions in the game would trigger a music hook. This is a list of some of the mostly and most common triggers that we might see in a game that affect the music. For example, changing the emotional stage, moving from exploration to combat, number of enemies that are attacking, amount of health the player has remaining, is it high health or low health, time of the day or the weather, is it night or day, is it sunny or rainy day, location, proximity of an enemy, solving the puzzle or finding the treasure, killing the boss or finishing the stage. All that affects how we compose music and uh, which part of the music we want to be hooked and triggered by a player's actions. So how do we start working together as a team? By getting everyone on the same page. The most important is to create game design document, so-called the GDD document, which contains all the information about the game for all the departments, art, music department, and all other departments. So this document contains characters, story, theme, story progression, gameplay, what is the goal of the game, what are user skills, what are game mechanics, items and power-ups, progressions and challenge, art style, music and sounds, technical description, marketing, founding, and all other details. And after that, the audio team and the music team can start thinking and consulting with the game developers and start conceptualizing music, which is actually providing overall creative direction for music in the game. And that conceptualization actually means gathering and assessing materials. We prioritize primary music objectives. We create an asset list, define our interactive elements in the score by finding triggers and hooks, what I already mentioned. We create a supporting audio style guide and we create an audio design document. And finally, we revise all of these materials, resources, and information gathered. The game development process, as I already said, starts from looking and consulting the game design documents, creating audio design document and audio style guide. And after that, we do the spotting, discussing where we want to have the music in the game, where we don't want to have the music, considering theme tracks, reference tracks, discussing music production, dialogue production, sound effects production, implementation, programming, and mixing. So let's talk a little bit about the audio style guide, which is the overall audio direction. This guide should gather all the information for the audio team about genre of music, the tempo of the music, is it fast or slow? This will also depend on the state. The instrumentation, do we want to create an orchestral score, electronic or hybrid score that is a mixture of both, or some ethnic score or any other type of the score? Size of the group playing, is it an intimate small group or grand, a whole orchestra or a band or other group of players? And the schedule. And you may also need to have different style guides for different parts in the game. The audio design document also represents an overview and overall creative direction for the style of music. For this document, you need to do a lot of research and also to include music interactivity and implementation outline, preliminary asset list, the file names and formats that we will be using, and the scheduling. Last year, I had the pleasure to work with the audio team at Berklee College of Music I worked with my colleagues Sanjit, who was the audio director, and my colleagues Alexander and Finn, and myself, and we created music for the game called Sun Warriors in collaboration with the Assets Center for Innovation and Digital Innovation in Video Games in Valencia, in Spain. And this game is a top-down shooter multiplayer game. And the narrative is that the world is created. It's called Homa, a lush world filled with flora and fauna. Now Homa protects the overworld, and he rules Homa, the land of light and home of the human race. On the other hand, Isel rules the underworld, and in the depths of the abyss, Isel governs her kingdom with her creatures. Isel is jealous of Naum, and after being ignored by the humans, she turns evil and decides to take revenge. An eclipse happens, and when the stars align, the underworld starts to slip into the overworld. And warriors have a big mission and task to put an end to Isel's invasion. So we've got the audio direction for the game development team. And this audio direction was that they wanted us to use vocal chorus with lots of chanting that goes along with the music and excitement. The instruments they wanted to hear were percussions, ethnic flutes, string instruments that mix together. They wanted fast tempo for frenetic music when the battle begins, and tribal folk and the slow tempo and much calmer music when exploring the world. And the overall atmosphere and mood should have been tribal and focusing on pre-Columbian cultures such as Incas, Aztecs, or Mayans. Their main references were Assassin's Creed, The Witcher, Diablo. But when started to work on the game, on music, we discovered that all these reference tracks are not really so good, such a good reference, because none of them was actually connected to the location, to this world of Mayas and the Incas and Aztecs. So our team actually found a much better reference, which is a soundtrack from the Apocalypto movie, and we basically arranged all our research and music based on this reference. So once we gathered all this information, we started working. We had our composer's toolbox at our disposal. And what does it mean? What does it contain, the composer's toolbox? So we actually used lots of imagination, because at that point the game was, we were far ahead of the game development team. The arts animation were in demo phase, and we didn't really have the complete big picture. I mean, the complete picture. We did have the big picture in our minds, and we knew what we wanted to do, but we didn't have materials to actually match our music to the gameplay, because it was not still developed enough. So the first point when creating music is imagination. So we started to think, how can the music best complement this game? How can music flow throughout the game? We discussed what design we should use to create these potential compositional outcomes that align with the full range of the gameplay. And we also discussed how to integrate our music into the game. For that purposes, we used Wwise. And this is actually where music is synchronized with picture, and where your score comes to life when you actually start using the audio middleware, and you see what works and what doesn't work, and what changes you need to make in order to make it work and sound better. So this is an example of our game, Sun Warriors, of music that we composed for this game. I'll explain later what this foreground, middle ground, and background means, but let's hear it a little bit. Okay, so that was an example. I hope you could hear the sound. So foreground, middle ground, background. This is extremely important as there is something called the rule of three in music, which means that our brain cannot really grasp more than three lines at the same time, not only in music, but in art, in photography as well. If there is a time, I might come back to this. So we always have this foreground, middle ground, and background. So for the foreground, I've used voices. By the way, this was the level 4 to 6. I was in charge for composing music for level 4 to 6. And this is my key for that levels. So in foreground, what you hear, like the leading melody line, the key point of focus, I used voices in the exploration stage. For the middle ground, which is the counterpoint and all the supporting elements, I've used pads and ambient drones also during the exploration. And for the background, I used some ethnic percussions and shakers, rattles, and afterwards, this foreground and middle ground and background actually changes depending on the state, because what you hear as the main key point of focus is not the same in different states. So once the player enters danger state, the foreground, the voices are going to the middle ground with pads, and foreground becomes ethnic flutes and ethnic percussions. And in the background, I keep the rhythm sections, drums, and percussions with the let's say, intensity of drums. And at the time when the player reaches the combat state, I use choir in the foreground, and for middle ground, I use pads. So continue to use pads and drums, but in the background section, I continue to use drums and percussions, but I increase the intensity of drums, let's say. So this is how the process looked like. This was all the demo stage, and this is how the final trailer sounds. This was published in July this year, and yeah, I hope you like the music. So getting back to the creation process. So once we started to compose music, we discussed what method we will use and what compositional technique we will use. And since the player is moving really quickly from state to state in this game, we have chosen the vertical remixing as the best technique for this type of the game. So what is vertical remixing? It's an interactive composition technique in which layers of music are added or taken away to create levels of intensity and emotion. It's important to understand that this is a single piece of music divided into multiple layers. For instance, we have layer 1, ambient drum that we use during the exploration stage. On this table, you can see it. And this layer goes all the way through. Then as the player approaches the danger, state, we add percussions on top of layer 1. And when the player reaches the battle, we add string ostinato and some other elements, melodic elements, or some percussions and drums for the combat. And the disadvantage of this technique is that tempo and harmony are static because we cannot change it throughout the gameplay. And as I said, it's used when the player goes between multiple states quickly. Another disadvantage of this technique is that it's heavy on memory buffering and CPU processing. So this needs to be discussed with game development team, and it really depends on the platform and the real possibilities if it's doable or not. So these are some of the advantages and disadvantages in composing for vertical remixing. This is good because it ensures musical continuity between states as the music is built from a single cue. And there is no distraction for players. Disadvantages are, as I mentioned, inability to sync harmonic, melodic, or tempo changes to screen events. And you should also consider silence as an important ally because not all the layers need to be playing all the time. We have two types of layering. We have additive and independent layering. The example that I showed you uses the additive layering, which means layers are added one by one, and they don't really stop. They just go along with a new layer on top, new layer on top, and so on and so on. So the whole process requires a lot of try and error mistakes, working on fading in and fading out. And in general, we use fast fading times that are less noticeable, and recommended value is between 500 and 1500 milliseconds. We also use longer fade outs in general because they are less noticeable and shorter fade times. And we use usually 3 to 5 seconds or 3 to 5000 milliseconds. I would like now to switch, just a second. I would like to switch to the Wwise software and to actually show you how this music for this game was implemented in Wwise. Give me a second just to see how I can now switch to the project. Okay. Give me just a second. Share screen. Oh, I think share computer sound. Oh, I really hope you can see this. Can someone let me know if you can see it? Can you see it? Okay, hopefully you can see.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, and let's hope that you can hear it as well. So this is a layering score, Sun Warriors layering score. Let me just play it for a moment. And please just let me know if you can hear it. Okay, so you have an idea what's going on. I will now guide you through the implementation of this vertical remixing layer, additive layering score. So let me close all of this. I will go quickly, but let's just get started. So the first thing when you open Wwise, you should check is that you are in interactive music mode. Then we will, for now, focus on this interactive music hierarchy. We go to default work unit with a right click. We create new child. We create music switch container. This is the box where your music will go, like a folder. And we name that switch container in-game music. All these icons are the same thing. You can choose whether you right click on here or you just simply click on the icons. So we created switch music container folder and called it in-game music. Then on that folder, you click right click, you create music playlist container. I'm not going to click because I've already done it. So this will be called level 1. And then in level 1, we create music segment and we group it and call it layers. Now, this is different than horizontal resequencing, because in horizontal resequencing, like crossfading, branching on transitional score, this music segment would be actually a state, like exploration, and then you would create another music segment and call it combat, and another music segment and call it escape, and so on and so on. But here, because this is vertical remixing, we actually create subdivisions of the music segment. So this is where the WAV file goes. This is the music track, and here you can also see, just move this. You can also see that you can manipulate that track. You can add fade in or fade out or fade in by clicking here. I cannot move it. Okay, like this. And you have pre-entry marker and post-exit marker, which you can also move. And this determines where your track actually starts and stops. And the good thing is that you can put the track with the reverb tail, and then the software, and create additional fade out, and the software will make much smoother transitions than if there is no reverb tail. So let me guide you through this again. So once you created this music playlist, you set up the tempo and time signature, and you tick override parent, because we will be using the same tempo in all cues, so there is no change of tempo. After that, we go to game syncs, and we go to states, to default work unit. With the right click, we add new child. We need to connect now state group in game music, and again right click and connect states, and we call it level 1. We will also set up game parameters. So you click in game parameters, default work unit, right click new child game parameter. I'm not clicking because I've already done it. And you set intensity parameter. And then you go back to audio, and sometimes You need to go back and forth. So once you are in audio, you go to level 1 to this music playlist. You go to real-time uh, parameter controller. Yeah, but this controller must be accessed actually from the music track. Yeah, from the music track. So in this mode, in real-time parameter controller, we will set up this intensity level. How do we do that? So in layer 1, this is an automation, the red line automation line. We never automate it in this window, but strictly in this window for the real-time parameter controllers. So you can see that it goes all the way through. This is our layer 1. In layer 2, I have set up intensity parameter to 2. So it will fade out from 1 to 2. And as the player is approaching the danger, it will start fading in along on top of the layer 1, which goes all the way through. So that's for the layer 2. And for layer 3, I will set the intensity level to 3, actually 2 to 3. So once the player enters the battle, this more layers of the sound will enter between fading between 2 and 3. Here you also have voice volume. Go to game parameters, default work unit, and you set up to intensity. That would be it for this. And then when you listen to it, you always need to listen from the level 1 from the music playlist, and you need to be in this mode, real-time parameter control, not in states, not in triggers, but here. And by changing the level of intensity, you actually are adding, you're hooking, you are triggering the intensity level. I only forgot to mention that in game syncs, in this game parameters, you should set up the intensity mode between 1 and 3. If you're using 3 layers, then 1 to 3. If you have 5 layers, then 1 to 5. Default defines from which state to start. If you want to start from the exploration, you put number 1. If you want to start from combat, number 3, and so on and so on. So getting back to audio, there are several more things you need to do, like to when you're in audio, you need to drag and drop these layers here into this music playlist editor, and to set the infinite looping. And one more thing, but I don't have time to explain that now. So by changing this level of intensity, we are triggering different layers, and that's how we are adding layers on top of layers that are all already playing. Exploration, intensity, nicely. I'm adding more layers. Okay, so that was the layering score. How much time do we? 10 minutes. Okay, let me show you now another example of transitional score, but I need to switch quickly to my presentation. Sure. Okay, let me go quickly through other types of composing techniques. Apart from a vertical remixing, we have horizontal resequencing, which is a method of interactive composition where the music is dynamically pieced together based on the actions of the player. We have 3 types. The first one is crossfading, fades out one musical cue while fading in another cue, and this is the least musical, and the change can be very abrupt. So we should tend to keep the same tempo and rhythm in this type of scoring. because if we change the tempo or rhythm, it will sound really not so musical. So we keep the same tempo and rhythm in this type. Branching is basically the same as crossfading, with the difference that the first cue first must finish before the next cue starts. This is the most musical technique, and it works best if the musical phrases are shorter, like less than 10 seconds. And we have transitional score, which is the same as crossfading, but uses transitional cue that bridges the two pieces of music together. This is an example of transitional score. And you can have combat, you can have danger in between, and so on and so on. This is how it looks like with the diagram. So we can have an intro, we can have exploration. To avoid this repetitiveness, we are not going to use only one loop, but we will create 4 similar loops and randomize them. So if the player needs to go through the same state over and over again, he won't or she won't be listening the same cue over and over again. But first time, they might hear a loop A1, A3, A2, and A4, and another time they might hear loop starting from A4 to A1, A2, and so on and so on. And this in between can be transitions. If you want to use transitional score, you simply add transitions. So crossfading is, you can actually crossfade at any point, and the disadvantage of crossfading is that if you have a solo instrument or a melody with a prominent melody, it can cut off your melody and it won't sound musical at all. It will sound abrupt and not so good. That's why branching is better, but the disadvantage of branching, when you need to wait for the whole state music to finish, is that it doesn't really match what's happening on screen. So player might be already in a battle while you are still finishing the music cue from danger. So it doesn't really match the screen properly. So that's the disadvantage, but musically it sounds really cool. Solution is to use branching and to find a musical point where you can actually crossfade somewhere in between of your music loop, so not to wait till the whole phrase and cue finishes. So I already mentioned all of this in branching and transitions. Each cue can have its own tempo and harmonic framework synchronized to players' actions. In crossfading, we keep the same tempo and rhythm and harmony to ensure seamless transitions between the cues. In transitional score, be careful with transitions because the same material gets old very quickly, so you may use at least 2 or 3 different transitions. And basically, it's very recommendable to use consistent instrument palette, themes, or rhythm throughout all the cues to create coherency and tie them up. These are some advantages and disadvantages for each type of mixing. And yeah, it all depends on the game and what's necessary. As I mentioned, vertical remixing, good for quick changes between the states. Horizontal transitional, musical transition into the next cue that ends the current music while introducing the next cue, and so on and so on. I will now go back to one more, just a few minutes to show you a transitional score in Wwise. It's a little bit different organization, but I think it's this one. Okay, let's go quickly. I think we are running out of time. Here, we will play back from level 1, from states. We will choose explore, start from there. I think I played it twice. Let me do it again. So this is transitional score implementation in Wwise. And this is exactly what I was talking about. When we move from exploration to combat, we heard this transition. So I don't have time now to guide you through the whole process of implementing, but here, in the same way, we have music segments. Now, in each music segment, we have a track. Now, you will see these pre-entry post-exit markers, and you will see this A and B, which is useful. These are custom cues. I will explain now how to use them. So when we are in level one, if you go to transitions, you will see that we need to set up these transitions. We set up 6 transitions from each state to each state, explore to combat, combat to explore, and so on and so on. And any to any, which means any of these states can lead to an end. Each of these states has source and destination. So in the source, you can choose whether you want to move to the next track immediately, or on the next grid, next beat, next bar, and so on. I have chosen next bar because it works well in this type. I have also set up the fade out time, like 3 seconds, and the curve. I didn't use fade in because it wasn't necessary. We are jumping into the next cue at the start of playlist, but you can play around with this. I'm using here, instead of entry queue, I'm using random custom queue. What does it mean? I'm matching it to letter A. If you remember, if I go back to, let's say, to explore track here, it means that when I'm transitioning, I will not be playing from the beginning of the pre-entry marker, but from, let's say, letter A or letter B. This is our random custom cue. So I find the most musical point, and then I actually cue it to that point and to that random custom cue. So basically, you have these transitions to set up here. We are not using this real-time parameter here, but we do use stingers. And if you want to hear a stinger, this is the final thing. You want to hear a stinger, so let's play again from the stage. I have stinger too, that I'm using only in the escape. Moving back to states. Let's go to combat. Finger 1, I can use in combat. And going back to 4. And now you can hear exactly what I was talking about. You hear I was using only one transition, and it gets old very quickly. So you always need to tend to have several transitions and to have a variety of transitions so that the player doesn't get bored with the same transition hearing over and over again. I think now that we are actually, I don't know what the time is, but I think I will stop here. And actually, it's up to us to determine and create the focus. Where do you want your listeners to focus? Think about that when you're composing, and then don't overcrowd, because what happens when too many elements are added to a composition? So foreground, the lead melody becomes indistinct and unclear, musical information becomes hard to retain, listener loses focus and interest. We should avoid elements that fight each other sonically or tonally, elements other rhythmically, and unnecessarily redundant elements. As in life, less is more, and more of something does not usually make its impact more effective. We can say that music is finished, not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. And that would be all from me today, and I'm happy to hear your questions now.
Oh, thank you, Ivana, again. And now we will ask you a couple of questions. So the first one, do you fragment music into particles within 2-3 seconds to make audio more optimized? Or there was no such a problem and crossfading of raw tracks like 1-3 minutes is enough?
Can you repeat what was the question? Do I create particles? Like, I didn't understand what the question was. Okay.
You did not understand?
Can you repeat, please? Just
yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Do you fragment music into particles within 2-3 seconds to make audio more optimized?
no, you don't have to do that, because the whole point of synchronization and implementation is actually in finding out the right numbers. So you don't need to work to fragmentize music in these smaller particles. You can do this optimization in the Wwise or FMOD, and programmers also can help you do that. So I'm not a specialist in implementing music. I know some basic things, but you can do that simply by playing around with fading, fade out, and solve this in the audio middleware such as Wwise or FMOD or Unity.
Thank you. Next one. Please name your personal top 3 games that, in your opinion, have great music storytelling element and why.
I'm sorry, I need you to repeat again.
Okay. Could you name your personal top 3 games that, in your opinion, have great music storytelling element and why?
Well, I'm a great fan of The Legend of Zelda. I like Call of Duty. I like Destiny 2. I like Journey, which is a completely different game, but it's one of my favorite games, and it really has beautiful visual storytelling and music storytelling as well.
Thank you. I think it's our session is ending and no more question now, but if you have any other questions to Ivana, you can ask her in private. Yeah. Thank you, Ivana, again.
Thank you once again. Thank you so much for your time and listening.